Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Philly Fan Radio. I'm your host, John Myer. Joining me is Dan Palmieri, also the co-host of this awesome podcast and radio show, bringing you the latest around Philly fan perspective. We are at training camp day 3, and we're actually going to recap kind of day 1, day 2 a little bit and where we stand. But we got a number of things to talk about, from not only position battles, Cam Jurgens, Saquon, Cooper DeJean, Griffin Hebert, wide receiver. Who the freak is this guy? Bryce Huff, and also the pass heavy camp. Dan, let's do this.
Absolutely. How you doing?
All right, my buddy, I'm glad to do this with you. Now let's talk about the first one, position battles for obviously the day 1, day 2. How can we talk position battles already? It's only 2 days, 3 days of training camp. Dan?
Well, absolutely. You could talk position battles. We've been talking about position battles ever since the season ended. We didn't even know who they'd
who's
be
going to
drafting.
retire next. Oh, speaking of that, did you see the latest retirement?
No, I did not.
He announced it at the end of the season already.
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. We kind of
Yes.
knew that already.
The man himself, Mr. Graham, right?
The longest tenured Eagle in team history. Well deserved. Well deserved.
It is, but before we get to our position battles, I know I already went off topic. Should you really announce a retirement before their season starts? Because then is your heart really in it?
Some players, I would say no, but I think Brandon Graham's genuine. I think that he's always going to be 110%, even though when he was getting bashed by the fans because he wasn't performing up to par for all those years, he was still, you can never deny his motor or his effort. It's just the production was never there. But after persevering, his production came about, and he's one of the top Eagle players of all time now.
And especially you can't, forget his Super Bowl stuff. I mean, come on now. He's going to always remember for that strip there. Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely. That was the greatest moment as Philly fan sports, I'm telling you what.
Dude, that was probably that right there put the nail in the coffin for us to relax just slightly, because as an Eagles fan, even though we're winning by maybe 100, we're still skeptic.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with Tom Brady on the other end.
Exactly. All right, let's go back to the position battles. Dan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so everybody knows the position battles are going to pretty much be on the defensive side. We do have some offensive guard position battles to talk about. Tyler Steen taking the first team reps as of right now. They are mixing in a little bit. And on a funny note, day 1 already saw its first purging as their new offensive guard was caught throwing up in the corner. So that's always a positive.
I saw that. And so what did it said? Oh, I saw a thing that said, looks like somebody wasn't practicing in the off season.
Yeah, they're already purging themselves of last year, which I can approve of.
So when I saw that post of him, what did they say? Somebody said 10 times, but either way, get it out of your system now, and you should have been doing off season. Maybe he was having just a bad day. Maybe he ate something bad for breakfast.
Yeah, well, mix that with the Philadelphia humidity, and I'm sure there's a lot coming up that day.
Exactly. Dan, what else do you got for us for some of those position battles?
Yeah, so on the defensive side, I mean, everybody's talking about our defensive line, in the edge battle. We had a very interesting update yesterday from our new defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Basically gave a half-hearted endorsement of our new multi-million-dollar edge rusher, Bryce Huff, saying basically that he has the potential to be an every down defensive end, but doesn't have that ability right now, which is a little troubling from a fan perspective because they just spent all that money, and even though Hassan Reddick is holding out still, we need that constant edge rusher, and whether or not Bryce Huff can fill that will be a huge question. Definitely.
Dan, let me ask you this. Do you like it that Vic called it out that he is not there yet but has a potential, or do you think he should have kept that in-house?
As a fan, I enjoy it. We finally get someone that can speak the truth, get a little out of his comfort zone, just talk to us like we're actually people. Too many times we get the Bill Belichick's up there saying basically nothing, and we get no concrete, wording ever, and nothing of substance. And it was refreshing to hear that. Now, whether or not the players appreciate that type of thing, I don't know. But at this point in their career, I think they should take it as a challenge and they should step up.
Dan, I like it that he called it out. Now, it's a double-edged sword because as a Philly fan, right, you hear this and immediately the fans are gonna be like, "What the freak? We just spent all that money. We just spent." You can't. But I
Mm-hmm.
like it that he said it, and maybe he puts a fire under his ass to actually be that potential. But at the same time, you know what? I think you need to take some constructive criticism. And as a defensive coordinator, Vic kind of gone in there and say, "Hey, listen, Bryce, I don't think you are there yet, but you have the potential to do that." Now, it could be kind of misinterpreted when he does go public about it, but I like it that he's sharing that information.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things during the collapse at the end of last year was we were talking about on the defensive side, where's the accountability? Where are the people standing up? Where's somebody standing up on that team saying, you know what, I'm taking charge of this shit and the skid is going to end right now? Well, he's creating accountability. He's calling people out and he's going to figure out who here is tough mentally and physically by calling them out and forcing them to improve.
Definitely. Now, are there any other position battles that you have for us?
Yeah, so linebacker core, Devin White seems to be penciled in as the starter. Great potential there. Had an All-Pro season mixed in there. Kind of fell out of favor last year, but it's going to be a great improvement on what we've seen out there. And as of right now, Zach Baun actually getting the opposite inside linebacker reps. Unfortunately, we did see, and I have not checked the updates yet, our hometown hero, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., went down with an injury yesterday. Strained, it looked like a hamstring issue the first time, came back out, tried to play through it until the end of camp, and then he was carted off. So
Oh,
I no idea the severity of that. Maybe it was released by now, but that'll be interesting to see what happens there. And of course, our secondary, think at this point, obviously, you're going to pencil Chauncey Gardner and Slay in there as starters, but who's opposite? I mean, there's a lot more rotation going on back there than I would have thought. But again, 2 days of camp, kind of just seeing what's going on. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an injection of youth, and I like it definitely.
we definitely need that in the secondary. Slay's great that side, but I think it's been very controversial on who's going to be opposite of him, and they haven't decided that. And I just remember back in the day when we had the best secondary out there, not only Vince, we had Dawkins, all those just were kind of always there, and you knew who was going to be controlling that back end, and nothing got it. And I think we need to get back there. I hope one day this is a season, right? As an Eagles fan, you're just
Mm-hmm.
hoping this is the season that we get back there.
No, absolutely, and they invested a lot of draft capital in there. They gave Bradbury that huge contract, thinking that they'd have that duo forever. But Bradbury is not even getting reps at corner now. He's getting reps at safety, not first team reps, but he is getting reps at safety. Um, they got the rookie Quentin Mitchell, but I think that transition's going to be a little bit longer. So anybody coming in thinking that he's going to start immediately, I think is um, not being realistic. I mean, this is a kid coming from the MAC. This isn't a kid coming from the SEC where they're playing NFL like every day. But from the MAC, I think the potential's there, obviously. In first team reps, though, we've been seeing a good mix of Isaiah Rogers, who was, of course, as we know, suspended last year, and Keely Ringo, who showed flashes last year. He wasn't a liability out there, which is more than I could say for most of our defense last year.
Yeah, I think Ringo did pretty good last year from when he came into it. I don't want to say like he was the go-to guy for all of it, but I don't think, and I have to echo what you said about that he wasn't a liability in it. Dan, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, I got to talk about it because obviously, with the retirement of one of the greatest players in Eagles franchise history, and I'm arguably NFL history as a center, yes, definitely. Jason Kelsey retires. Now, I know it was funny. I was seeing all the posts when they brought Saquon on that he might want to come out of retirement. Do I think he's coming out of it? No, I think he's more of now he's the face of it, right? The name brand of it. And we have Cam Jurgens stepping in for it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the athleticism is there. We've seen flashes of it from a guard perspective, but I think we as fans have to understand that it's not going to be Kelsey. Kelsey did things on the football field that no other center or maybe even offensive lineman could do from an athleticism point of view. I mean, this guy was 15 yards downfield on routine, making blocks and just pancaking people. But you got to remember when Cam Jurgens was drafted, one of the biggest reasons he was drafted was that Jason Kelsey told Stout, let's go draft this guy. He's a good guy. I see a lot of myself in him. And that's a pretty good. If you're going to get endorsed by somebody, I'd rather be endorsed by a future Hall of Famer, that's for sure.
What are your thoughts on 4th and 1 with Cam Jurgens?
Uh, I can't even venture a thought on that because it remains to be seen. But I mean, he was the guard. He did start last year. He was the guard. It's just that we all know on the 4th and 1, it's going to be our center really causing that havoc. I think he's going to be good. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's going to have a borderline Pro Bowl season. Um, Mainly because of the fact that you look around him. We've got an All-Pro at left guard. We've got a Pro Bowler, maybe All-Pro at left tackle. We've got arguably the best right tackle in football. And at right guard, it's going to be a little bit of a flux. I mean, could it be Tyler Steen? Could it be one of the veterans that we brought in? But it makes it a little bit easier when you've got big pave the lane on the side of you, just mauling people. But the 4th and 1 was such a staple. But whether it be 4th and 1 or not, I think that they're still set up to be in great position.
I think exactly what you said before is that Eagles fans need to realize that, Cam Jurgens is not Jason Kelsey, and he could potentially be bigger than him. I mean, there's always that aspect, but I think Cam needs to go in there, and this is just from a personal thing, is not realize that you have to live up to, Jason Kelsey. You have to live up to the potential of every single play. And you have to live up to 4th and 1. You have to, the blocks, the downfields, everything. You just have to do those. And you don't even have to do those as Jason Kelsey did. I'm doing as you do in order to make the play happen. And the Philly fans will love you. Yes, you will mess up once or twice, and you might get the Philly fan boo. Don't worry about it. Keep plugging on because it's not just one game that's going to define you. It's multiple games. It's your career. It's the season that will define you.
No, absolutely. Well said. It's you can't be chasing Jason Kelsey's legacy. You're not going to get there. You got to be your own player. I mean, I remember there were years, and I'll be the first to admit I was guilty of it, where we thought that Jason Kelsey, this guy's a bust. This guy, he's undersized. I remember a ton of times where he would line up against a nose tackle in Dallas, and I'm sorry I forget his name, but he was getting his lunch handed to him constantly. Um, and but thankfully Stout got him in a good place, and it helps having what I to consider to be the best offensive line coach in the league by far.
Definitely. And now I think one of the things that is going to help him out is to realize that all he has to do is be himself and execute the plays. Now, I know the plays are going to change this year. We have a new OC, new DC, everything's going new, and which is really kind of concerning. And speaking of that, Dan, after 2, 3 days of camp, has it restored your faith from last year?
Uh, from everything I hear, it's restored my faith that they've moved on. definitely. If anything, they're kind of pissed about hearing us talk about it anymore, which is good.
And
Use
here
that
we
as
are,
motivation.
right?
Yeah, use that as motivation.
Yep.
I mean, I'll talk about it during in season if it motivates them to win. But it restored my confidence in that there's an energy. Definitely, as a fan, you feel it.
Yep.
The city of Philadelphia feels it. I mean, eh, we're in training camp right now. We just started training camp, and it's got to be the number one talked about thing in the town. I mean, we've still got the Phillies going on. We've got huge transactions that were made by the Sixers. Some news from the Sixers talking about actually Wells Fargo Center is not going to be the Wells Fargo Center anymore. So I mean, there's interesting things going on, but I mean, third day of training camp is we're talking about Eagles.
Yeah, but
It's
here's the
definitely.
thing, Dan, and I gotta go to last year. We were doing the same thing. We go in there as Eagles fans, all freaking hyped up. Yeah, they look great on paper, and look how the season ended last year. Are you feeling the same this year that you're going in hyped up, or do you feel that they're actually different? And it's very hard to answer that, being that we're only on day 3. But the feeling and everything I'm reading and seeing is definitely different.
Yeah, I mean, things are definitely different. I like the guy. I like Sirianni, but I think it's going to help just having one voice, and that being Kellen Moore, and that you get reports out there that said, oh well, Brian Johnson didn't like the plays that Sirianni was handing him. Sirianni didn't like the plays Brian Johnson was handing him. Jalen Hurts was just freestyling out there. But what it comes down to is we need one voice. You know, we need one guy calling the plays, and we need a structure. And I think that's going to happen here. And I think Sirianni, whether or not it be threatening of the job or whatever it may have took, I think he took a step back and I think he realized that it can't be run the way it was last year.
Well, speaking of Jalen Hurts, let's run through a couple of stats. And I've heard great things about him already at training camp. One, he's seen, surgically delivering the ball not only to AJ to Devontae, but if they're not there, he's checking down to a second option, which last year was very critical and tough for him to do because he was always going for that first read, the second read. He wasn't getting there in time. But let me read you a little something here. Is Jalen Hurts training camp stats for day 2. And this is by Elliott, and it was actually on Twitter. And I was like, oh man, this is actually pretty good. The best words to describe Hurts today is surgical, which I liked his word he used. He's been so good at where he's going with the ball. Each throw, the receiver is either open or the ball's put where only the receiver can catch. Hurts' best throw of the day was a deep pass to AJ where it was right over his shoulder. Now, the stats for day 2 was 15 out of 17. I'm not sure how you can count 0 TDs and 0 interceptions, but his grade was A. But
Yeah, as an Eagle fan, you want that grade. I don't care if they're in shorts or not. They got the Eagles jersey on, then we want to see some stats. But he's looked good. Very critical of him last year, as everybody was. That, as you alluded to, first read's gone, and what's he doing? Well, he's still locked in, or he's basically bailing. But I think one of the most comforting things we could take as fans, and if you go back and watch the Super Bowl season, and then you go back and watch last year, there was a speed difference there. Hertz did not look the same speed wise. And I'm not talking about processing of information, I'm talking about scrambling, anything. And from what we hear in camp is that he's fast again. And if we get him fast again, then that opens up an entire page of the playbook that Kellen Moore can utilize.
Dan, I don't want to speculate last year, but there was a number of things indicating that he was injured, but going through it, like his knee, he didn't feel it. He did not look good on the field when he was running and scrambling. He did look a little slow coming out, and he was always getting hit within the line of scrimmage or like 2 yards. And hearing how fast he is this year already in day 3 of training camp is nice to hear that our quarterback is back to the Super Bowl run they had.
Yeah, definitely. It's comforting from a fan perspective to hear that. But I think it's good for Jalen too. I think one thing that it's hard to look at it from the human perspective in terms of we're not involved in it, but we have a 20 something year old kid who was just handed a bag of $250 million. The way that he approaches it and reacts to getting that money from a mental perspective might have been a little different. Not to say it's acceptable, I don't think that he slacked off or anything, but the way that he approaches it, I think he's got it to understand that from a leader, he lacked last year. And I think that he's going to correct that. I have trust that he's going to correct that, because if there's anything from what we've seen Hurts is that he's going to lead, not by his voice, but he will lead by example. And I think that's what's lacking last year.
Something I grade Hurts on 2 years ago, the NFC Championship, or no, it wasn't the NFC. It was against the 49ers. And the wording came across from the 49ers is this guy can't read. And then the next year, wiped the floor with them. And it was awesome to see that, Hurts do that. And then, obviously last year was back to, okay, it looked like he can't read, like he digressed back to it. And I don't want these every other year deal. And I think he's just growing as a player, as an Eagle and a perspective. I think he has a different mentality on how he handles every single play. He's got short-term memory if it's bad, and he does enjoy those things. And yes, as fans, we want to see him down on the sideline like, yeah, that's freaking awesome. But maybe that's not him, and we need to accept that as him as long as he's performing and able to have that short-term memory. When shit hits the fan, he's able to throw it down the field afterwards and just come back to it.
Yeah, I think, like you said, he needs to stay steady. There were a lot of things that went against him last year.
Yeah, it's definitely not all on him, but he is the quarterback, so he's the first person going to be looked at.
Of course. Yeah, he's the face of the franchise. He's the one who's going to get the blame. I think
Yep.
they were all pressing, when it came to it, because, their defense is letting up touchdowns like crazy. So what do you got to do? You got to press to try to get touchdowns, and you feel like it's just spiraling, and it just happened that way. But I think Hurts, you're going to see a big year from him. I mean, you got a guy like Saquon back there. As long as he can stay healthy, you've it's crazy to think, Howie the Magician has gotten all pros at pretty much every level of this offense, and yet they still have cap room.
Yep.
While teams in our division can't pay CeeDee Lamb, they're not going to be able to pay Micah Parsons.
Who?
They're not going to. Yeah, exactly. Daniel Jones is $40 million against the cap. It's ridiculous the way he's able to organize this roster.
Before we actually get to Saquon, there are a number of holdouts, and the first person I actually want to talk about is Hassan Reddick, and he actually went over to the Jets. He's in the final year of his contract. He's holding out. I believe Love's holding out. Who else is on the list of holdouts?
Yeah, Love is holding out, but he's at practice.
Yes,
but
he is.
His agent said he won't practice with the team until he gets the new contract. A little odd, but
what is he doing? Sitting there?
He's basically standing there in a sweatsuit. Yep, enjoying the Wisconsin air, I guess.
A quick question before I roll over to Saquon. What are your feelings on the player? Now, there's a whole aspects of holding out, and I understand why they're doing it. And to be honest with you, it's just a game that they have to play for it. It sucks when it's on your team, and that's what's happening. But missing that training camp and missing that practices and those first team reps on it, I think is very critical for when you go into the preseason and the regular season.
Yeah, especially since the NFL preseason is now 3 games, and when you
Which
think
should be
about
0.
it, well, yeah, I'd agree. I think that 2 might be the sweet spot, but you need to be able to evaluate these guys somehow. But as we've seen, joint practices are happening with other teams constantly, and starters aren't even playing in the preseason anymore. So it's pretty much become a joke,
Yep.
But I get why they're still doing it, but I think in the coming years, you're probably going to see another game added to the regular season, another preseason game knocked off.
I think Joe Burrow said it. I think I said this on the last one. He had an interesting take on how it should go. Get rid of preseason, 18 games, 2 bye weeks. The week 13 should be a bye week for everybody, in which it should be the Pro Bowl week for everybody, however you want to do it, or the week for it. And you would actually get people more interested in it and more rest for some of the things. I don't know how that mid 13 week Pro Bowl would work out for most players, because you might just be like opt out and heal a little bit for the regular season. But I do believe even Goodell said the preseason, it's just a waste. And it's a waste for us as actual season ticket holders, because the cost is pretty much the same for those tickets versus regular.
Yeah, they pretty much just divvy them up, just to,
Yeah.
divide. And you're
Oh,
never going to get a return on investment in those tickets.
not at all. You either take a hit, or you sell them for low quality, or you just don't make anything and you try to attend. And most of the time, the Thursday night at like 7 o'clock or whatever it is a preseason game, and you don't want to deal with the traffic to go down there. You'll just watch it.
Yeah, no, definitely agree.
All right, Dan, let's talk about Saquon real quick before we roll over to a couple of other topics. What's your feeling so far?
Saquon, from what I understand, has looked like a monster. They're not really running the ball, which leads into a completely different topic, but not really running the ball too much, but we're seeing his hands on display. He's able to catch the ball. He's a good outlet for Hurts when he's looking over, looking over the field and it's not there. So I think fans can be very, very excited about what they're going to see from him. But as always, it's going to be whether or not he can stay healthy. The guy's built
Yep.
like a freak, but he's just had these weird injuries, and it's just been unfortunate. And hopefully, actually having an offensive line that isn't a leaking pipe will help him.
Dan, here's when I look at Saquon, and when you said he's catching passes and all that stuff, I envision Westbrook, right? Always out on the out and then catching that and then taking it down the field. I don't want to compare him to it, Westbrook, but I have a feeling that's really where his main ability and use is going to be. Plus, we have an awesome line, which I think his utilization of his legs, I mean, his legs are like tree trunks, man. I've seen him lift. It's freaking awesome to do it. Dan, I'm going to read you something from the Eagles Philly Nation on Saquon. And his comments go, ultimately, I came here to build a new legacy, compete and win championships. And that's helping in any way I can. I know there's going to be games where they put the trust in 2-6 and want to take it over. There'll be other games where we let AJ and Devontae do what they do. And he goes, I just want to win. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely, that's what we want to hear. That's exactly what we want to hear. And
That
another
is a team
interesting
player.
thing. Oh yeah, absolutely. We can never question that the kid is not self-centered, not at all.
Yep.
But another cool thing that came out of it was that the first thing that he said was he came on the field and looked at AJ Brown and he said, "I can't believe we get paid to play this game." And how cool is that? He's like a kid. He's
Yep.
like a kid out there, and it's good to hear. He's coming from a team in which he got a real bad rap. I mean, most of us have seen Hard Knocks, where they basically didn't want to invest anything in him, thinking that he's over the hill and he's not the face of their franchise. So, screw the Giants. Let's make sure that everybody knows that they made a huge mistake. And I think it's going to be really funny to watch that first game in New York. And you're going to see them out of spite give him the ball like 30 times.
Oh, I hope 2 times a year he's going to get a chance, and I hope we do run heavy at that point.
Oh, yeah. I hope we throw like one pass that game. Just
I
let him
hope.
take over.
Heck yeah. You know how Boston Scott was the Giants killer. At this point, Saquon's going to be that. He's going to take it over. He's got something, a little chip on his shoulder to prove that he's not over the hill. He's ready to take it down. And when you have a line that's going to help him in order to get the ball out and run it up the gut, there's nothing going to stop him.
No, absolutely. Full head of steam. You can actually use some athleticism in open space. I think you're going to see a brand new running back. I mean, there's a reason why he is so liked by his peers. There's a reason why that everyone still says he's one of the best players in the league. and his stats don't really reflect that. And you got to look at it and say, I wonder what they're seeing that his stats aren't showing. And I clearly think that you have to put some of it on what the situation he was in.
Yep.
They had nobody to throw to. They had no quarterback. They had no line. I mean, you're going to load the box with 8 people every single time. And I just hope to God they load the box with 8 people against our receivers. It's going to be a field day.
I can't wait. That's the excitement there. You've got Saquon, you got Devontae, you got AJ, you've got Goddard. I mean, and there's so many more out there that we have on a team that allow us to be very flexible. That, oh, you want to do that? We'll go here. And I think that's going to make a huge dynamic this year. Like I said, they look great on paper. Training camp's looking ecstatic, and I'm excited to see them. Actually, I'll be down at the open practice that's happening on August 1st, next Thursday. See some of this in action.
No, definitely. And if there's one thing I have to complain about is that I think they got to have more open practices for the fans. I mean, I miss the days of Lehigh. I really do.
I do. Same deal here where you could just go up, show up, and just see them in general. But they've gotten so huge that everybody wants to see them. When they do those practices down in the stadium, it's almost like a preseason game.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's great time, especially if you want to bring the kids. It's a
Yep.
great time to see everybody, get to see what the team's going to look like. But it would be nice to just have a few more,
Yep.
get to see the team up close personal. I know that season ticket holders have the opportunity to go see the team at NovaCare. I know that I've gotten an invite to that, but of course, within 24 hours, all the spots are sold out. So don't have the chance to do that this year. But I know there are
Oops.
opportunities as fans.
Sorry. I'll be
Uh,
there.
of course.
I'm sorry. I quickly, when I see that email, I jump on it like this because I know they're going to be gone.
Yeah, I got the email. I got distracted at work. I came home and I completely forgot about it. And then the next day I saw it and I tried to register and it just didn't happen.
Yep. All right. So anyway, I'll change that subject a little bit. Let's talk about DB Cooper DeJean. Second round, 40th overall. What's happening, man?
Yeah, I guess they said that he pulled his hamstring. Nothing serious. But kind of what you said earlier is that these reps are very important, especially for a rookie.
Yep.
And I think anybody who was looking and envisioning at Cooper DeJean starting, whether or not that be safety, nickel corner, I think that plan is kind of went by the wayside now because there's not going to be a chance that he starts week 1 when he's got to miss now 3 weeks of practice.
I think it's tough with a hamstring injury and in preseason like this, where it's just a nagging throughout the entire season. And I know people want to play. I know the players want to get in there and they want to start earning a thing. But I think the biggest thing is that you can have a successful season is to at least heal as much as possible. And yes, us as the fans are going to be a little disappointed that you're not in there doing your job. But at the same time, you're no good to us if you go out there and you pull it severely and then you're done for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a tricky injury. You've seen people try to come back early from it, and it turns out to be season ending. So I'd rather than play it cautious, get those mental reps. But it is disappointing because the potential is there for the kid.
Yep. All right, Dan, let me wrap up this with our last one. And you've noted that it seems pass heavy to start the camp. Are we concerned with Keelan Moore's track record? I don't even know if I'm saying the dude's name. Keelan Moore, Kellen, whatever, track record?
I mean, I as a fan am concerned because we just spent all that money on a running back, and I want to see them load up and run the ball. I mean, that's what we were screaming last year. Kellen Moore, I don't have the stats in front of me, but he's around a 65 to 35 type of guy, and that's real extreme. Passing the ball. And while our receivers can definitely handle that workload, and it's been successful in the league. We have the tools to run the ball heavy, And I'd rather see that in today's NFL, you're never going to be 50-50. I'd rather see that be more as a, let's say, a 60-40, 55-45 type of deal. So I'm a little concerned only based on his track record in the past. But maybe having such a weapon like our offensive line and Saquon Barkley, maybe it causes him to rethink that a little bit. I mean, it would me, if I was a coordinator, I would, you know, lean on your guys in the front. You have a mauler out there in the offensive line, just run behind him. I mean, he was successful with having Ezekiel Elliott in his prime. He was running the ball heavy. Not necessarily heavy, but, Ezekiel Elliott was an all pro. So I think if he sticks to his guns that way, I think we'll be okay. But it is a little concerning. But again, in camp, you're not really going to practice too much on the run game, I don't think, until the pads come on.
I think being concerned this early, I don't know if I want to be concerned this early being pass heavy because we're only on day 3 and we're reporting on day 2 availability and a little bit of day 3 stuff we've heard already. We're adding into the mix. But I think maybe there's some chemistry that he's trying to build between Hurts and the receivers and get back to where Hurts was during his Super Bowl run. Now, I agree with you where you're not going to be doing running too much until the pads are on, because what are you going to do? You're just going to let him go through. You're not going to try to hurt him. So going up the gut, there's not really much more to do it. I think it's the handoff that's critical, or the screen that might be a little bit. But other than that, I think we need to evaluate this in the next week. When do pads come on?
I don't know. I don't know when pads come on, to be honest with you.
I think it's a week before the preseason game, and the preseason game's actually coming up. I think they might have it like once or twice. Or I got to look up there what they're required or allowed to do. But I think you're right. When the pads do come on, that's going to be a little bit more of the running aspect of it.
Yeah, like you said, you can't really gauge how successful the running game is if you're not allowed to tackle the guy.
Yeah, exactly. 2-hand touch.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you look across the league, though, you're seeing people get laid out, and meanwhile, we basically have flags on. So
I miss that. To be honest with you, I know they're trying to protect them. Yes, this is preseason, but I think when you or like training camp, when you go into preseason and you have those games and the starters don't play, the first game is technically their preseason game, and they're sore for like a couple days, 3 days. They're not in a rhythm until like the third. I think having a little bit of that physical contact. There was an aspect with Doug Peterson where the players said, we missed that. We want to do the pads. We want to go in full. And we need that in order to make ourselves better. And Doug listened to them. And I think there's an aspect of it that you need the players to be able to have the pads on. Obviously, I'm going to say if they want, but in my opinion, I think it just makes you a better player rather than trying to grab the flag.
No, it definitely does. It's that balance of risking injury against, actually practicing. And I can't even go into all the details of, what the collective bargaining agreement is and states that you can and can't do, certain amount of practices you can have, certain amount of hours you can go. I mean, it's such a in-depth negotiation that they made to where the players are protected really heavily. So.
Well, speaking of the players being protected really heavily, obviously tackling is a little bit more tricky for players, and you got to pick up them and gently put them down on the ground to make sure that they're okay. You give them a pillow. I understand protecting the quarterback. Yeah, we hated some of the rules that came across, but when it's protecting your own quarterback, you like it. Now when you tackle, what is it? No hip tackle? Like you can't wrap around and...
Yeah, you can't hip drop. It's going to be very weird. I mean, I don't know how they're going to call that. But I did see a study that said that there was only a defined, I think, 5 hip drop tackles that would have been flagged last year. So it might not be as big of an impact as we're thinking.
Yeah.
But it's all a mental thing. I mean, where are you going to hit the guy? Yep. I mean, I would hate to be a secondary guy like Dawkins playing in today's game, he'd be flagged on every single snap because he'd just be laying people out,
Defenseless
and you
player.
can't see that.
Gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that would have been like so
targeting.
many times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's going to be it's hard. It's got to be hard on the defense, but as they always say, the offense puts butts in the seats. But when it comes to January and February, the motto is that defense wins championships, and
Yep.
it was definitely our defense that cost us a championship last year for sure.
I'm going to disagree slightly. I think our offense really a little bit last year. I mean, defense definitely was one of the things. Those damn slot runs were a given. You could have just, you know what? You might as well just sit on the ground and let them go to that. But Dan, I got to wrap things up. I think our next episode, we got to talk a little bit about the new kickoff rules that are happening. And what are your thoughts on this and how well that will increase the game? Because they took this from what XFL, what did the XFL, USFL kind of merge? What is it now?
UFL, United Football League.
Yeah. Is it UFL
Yeah.
or? Yeah. Okay. So obviously they merged. It was pretty good. And that's where the rules came from. And I think that's really interesting on how they kind of made these rules and the NFL is adopting them. So I think we need to talk on that and talk on what's happening at training camp and obviously the open practices, the in-person stuff, what we're going to feel. And we'll share some pictures, some highlights from it, and maybe some of the closed practices. Maybe Dan might go with me. We'll see how that'll go.
Yeah, I'm tasking you since you got there in time. You're the responsible adult of the podcast, so you're going to have to report back to us as to what you see.
Report back. Dan did not act in time. Missed.
Dan's a child, and he needs to be put in the corner.
Definitely. All right, everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. Dan, thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you again, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, until the next episode, everybody, this has been the Philly Fan Radio. I was your host. Dan's my co-host. And until next time, because guess what? We're out of here.
See you later.